Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. If you didn't hear me a minute ago, I was just saying thank you for joining early. It's really great to see people getting in ahead of time. I will give people just one more minute to come in to make sure that we don't cut anybody off right from the start. And yeah, so I'll just be another couple of seconds. Vinod, can you just confirm that you can hear me and you can see my screen? Just want to be 100% sure before I get started. All right, we might kick it off. If somebody could just mind dropping into the chat and they can see my screen and can hear me. There we go, in the questions. Thank you, Bevan. Very much appreciated. All right, so Plant 3D User Community Virtual Meetup, May 12th. I guess virtual meetup doesn't mean so much these days since everybody's doing everything virtually. But I hope you're all safe and healthy and doing well. And thank you very much for joining. As I said before, it's great to see people coming in early. My name's David Manning. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, just a quick reminder, I think everybody's going to be muted by default. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A panel is the best option there, or there's a chat button there if you prefer to use that. Q&A is great for the questions, chat just for general chit-chat. This is a casual session. I will intend to unmute everybody so that everybody can talk if you want to. I'm more than happy to answer questions as we go through. I'm just going to unmute all. So you should be able to unmute yourselves if you need to. Like I said, as we're going through, feel free to ask questions as they come to mind or drop them in the chat. And I've got Vinod with me as well. He's going to answer them as they come through. And we are recording as always, and this will be available on the Customer Success Hub later for you to catch up on. That's my lovely picture there. So as I said, my name's David Manning. I am based in Sydney. For some reason, the slide's gone a bit skewed, but that's okay. And been around for a little while doing a few things in industry and with Plant 3D. Vinod is with me on the panel at the moment. I just thought I saw a question. And he's one of our technical support specialists, doing a wonderful job in the background there. If you've logged cases, you more than likely have seen his name come through on the emails. Today's agenda, overview as always, and we'll touch on a bit of news. And the most important thing, and hopefully why everyone's here, is what is better, Revit or Plant 3D? I'm going to touch on the pros and cons of each product and when each tool is best to be used, and have a quick touch on the Plant 3D interoperability workflows. There is a bit of a sneak preview of something coming up in 2 months' time, I think it is, at the end to on the workflows. Follow up on questions from last month. We didn't have any, so we won't be needing to worry about that, and the open QA at the end. But like I said, we'll touch on anything as we're going through if need be. So the objective today is to review Revit and Plant 3 and where each of those two tools are at their strongest in comparison to each other. Understand where collaboration for Plant 3D works in version 2021. No, that's all from last month. Let's move on from that. So this is a casual conversation, so do feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions as we're going through at any stage. I'd love to hear your voices and hear open questions, as that is the whole point, is to be a community, is to engage with each other. Just give me one moment. So the safe harbor statement, as you'll see it on the screen, is our sort of catch-all statement that we may not talking about the future of products, and the last thing I want to do is give you a false impression. So anything we say here, I will give you the honest truth to my experience and knowledge. But if you're making any decisions, please do get them confirmed with Autodesk officially. All right, so that's just, I don't want to give you the wrong impression at any stage. So you get the official word from Autodesk. And if I can progress the slide, there we go. Touching on the news, one of the most interesting things is we now have collaboration for Plant 3D, as we all saw last month, but we also have access to the European BIM 360 server. Now, the two servers are not identical. And on the left side there, you'll see the services or the modules that are supported on each of the two servers, the top one being the Americas or the US servers, and Europe being the bottom one. And we've highlighted on the right-hand side just the different URLs that you'll see. But if you've got projects that are predominantly functioning out of a more European-centric half of the hemisphere, then maybe you would be interested in using that server. Alternatively, of course, we continue using the US ones. And quite honestly, I've had people doing projects right around the world on the US server and have had very little problems. So just be aware of that. I also wanted to just take a beat to touch on the collaboration for Plant 3D access. We've had a lot of questions about this, and I'm also going to publish these slides to the vlog in the next couple of days, hopefully. But just touch on it. So talking about single user subscriber licenses. So if you're a subscriber and you're trying to use collaboration for Plant, there's a few gates you need to get through, kind of that Swiss cheese effect. And if they don't all line up, it can be a little bit difficult. First one, of course, is needing to use to get access or be licensed for the Plant 3D application. In the subscriber world, that is done through Autodesk account. And when you launch the project, the product will be asked to sign in or identify your product, depending on how you've bought it, depends how that works. And Autodesk account will validate that you have the correct license to use Plant 3D, allowing you to do that. It will not actually give you access to the collaboration feature, even though it's installed with the product. When you click on that, it will tell you you may not have the access rights. To get access to the collaboration feature, you need to also have BIM 360 design. When you do that, it will show up in Autodesk account, and in the subscriber world, it's doing that as well, and it checks that through your profile. That will then give you access to the BIM 360 suite of tools that are assigned under design, and there's a few there as well. You can use Desktop Connector to access the project, and it gives you access to the doc space as well. But it's worth noting that Plant 3D is accessing a folder inside your BIM 360 docs folder structure. So docs is entitled under BIM 360 design for the purpose of collaboration. You need to have permissions to see and download the files in that folder. Easiest way to do that is to get in the web browser and make sure you can see the project XML in the folders. If you can't see it, then you certainly can't open it in Plant 3D. Once you've got that, the Swiss cheese all lines up, and you should have no problems getting your project to work in a collaboration environment. In the multi-user environment, it is often slightly different, and we're talking about here using server-based licensing. It uses a network license server to issue licenses to users, and in that case, what we're looking at here, the real difference is this first step where we log into, we're on the WAN or the LAN or the VPN for our enterprise, and when we start our Plant 3D, it's when you first launch it, it gets licensed, or it's done part of the deployment, to the licensed server that you're required to access. That gives you the ability to use the application. And then when you then go to try to use the collaboration feature, it's going to want to go out and validate that with Autodesk account. Okay, so there's two separate systems there, the corporate license and the Autodesk account, which does go back to your corporate license, but it is entitled through your Autodesk profile. Now, you may not have done it to start with, but at this point, you'll be asked to sign in. Again, top right-hand corner of the product, you'll see a sign into Autodesk services. And once you've done that, and assuming you've got BIM 360 design entitled to you by someone, you can utilize that entitlement to, again, access BIM 360 design. And again, finally, as long as you've got access to the project folder, so the Plant 3D can find that project XML, then you will have access to your collaboration projects and can work without any problems. Okay, so just a quick tip there. And if there's any questions, I'd love to see them in the chat. I don't think anybody's unmuting. Bevan, I see you've got your hand up. Did you want to ask a question? I'll see if I can unmute you. 1 second.
No, I'm good, thanks. Sorry, that was from before.
No, you're good. No, that's all right,
no,
mate. That's all right. I just wanted to check. Wonderful. Thank you. Glad to see the system works anyway. Good check. Okay, so into the meat of it. What is better, Revit or BIM 360? In all honesty, there's a bit of a hook there. Neither is better. They are certainly better in their own ways and for certain things, as in they both have strengths, and they both are better in some use cases, but neither is better than each other. They both have their place in the world. It is really dependent on where you sit and your perspective of those use cases. So we thought we'd take a look at it in a direct comparison structure first. So this is a Plant community meetup, so I know you're all very familiar with Plant 3D, but we thought we'd sort of set the stage a little bit and just sort of look at what we've called the Plant 3D spine, where we start at the top left-hand corner with the specs and catalogs editor, where we can edit our components and we can build out our specs, which is ultimately the backbone of the Plant 3D environment being spec-driven. That then drives value through to the P&ID and the Plant 3D space by using those specs. Of course, you don't need to use them for P&IDs, but it does increase the value there. And there's plenty of other tools that go on to add value and speed and quality and efficiency. So we can use those specs in P&ID and in 3D modeling environment. Of course, where some huge value comes into the P&ID environment is generating reports, and in fact, that's generally, you can see the two blue arrows going from the modeling environment and the P&IDs back to the reporting section, taking reporting from spreadsheets and notes and books on the shelf, as I vaguely remember keeping ISO drawing numbers in logs, down to single-click buttons that can be updated at the drop of a hat, and they're 100% accurate with what's in the system. Rather, it just eliminates human error and makes things a lot faster. Huge savings there, as well as accuracy. Of course, when you move from the P&ID into the 3D environment, we start talking about the isometrics, the bills of materials, again, kind of a reporting function. We can spit out all the isometrics in a largely automated fashion. And similarly with the orthos, we have the intelligent orthographics, and they're connected back to the models. They'll update. We can annotate with intelligence, pulling data from the database and the drawings. We can create GAs and BOMs to a heart's content to a large degree, and do all that relatively easily and efficiently. In a lot of similar ways, when we take a pause over to the Revit side, we look at the same sort of structure. Revit is still a file-based database. A file is a database, effectively. And we start at the top right-hand side is the Revit master model. And you can get, again, reporting coming out to the left-hand side of that. It does use parametric families where we're using objects in Plant 3D. We're using families here, so there's a lot of similarities there, but there's pros and cons to both styles as well. 2021 version of Revit is generative design featured, allowing you to use Dynamo and other features to analyze the design, to test various iterations, and do a significant thing, a whole class on that, so we can't spend too much time there, but it is being built out, and it is going to continue to be built out. And the last point there on the left is the addresses three main areas. So when we're talking about buildings or structures, and we even talk about, it goes beyond just buildings. So Revit is not just for buildings; it goes into a lot of things. But its history is founded in building design. So we talk about three main areas: the architectural model, which is the physical structure, the building itself, the fascias, the walls, the fittings. Then we also talk about the structural model, which can be just a structure. You could build a shed with it. I'm sure people do. But is the structural design, the members, similar to what we would do in Plant 3D with the structural module, only significantly more detailed. And there's definitely a parallel there to the advanced steel, which we'll touch on in a bit. And the final one is the MEP model, which is where the crossover tends to happen a little bit, because that's piping as well as other areas of the MEP side, which is cableways and cable trays, ducting, and all those sort of things as well. Each of those different main areas also have views or drawings that they can extract out of that. They're set up as views within Revit and reports that go along with each of those as well. So a lot of similarities, but we're obviously coming at it from two different directions. And I think when you go from the architectural side and the heavy industry plant side, both moving to develop towards the center, you can see there's a logical point where things start crossing over. And that's what we're talking about today, is where those points cross over. We just put in the bottom left-hand corner, Revit does have a number of file formats there. You can see fairly straightforward project templates, the family templates, and obviously the project and the family files themselves. So they are RVT files, and they are broken out that way, although they do tend to get significantly large in size. Just to look at Revit in the Plant 3D project environment, Revit will particularly help, as we're talking about, is where can Revit help a plant project? Plant doesn't do structures very well. It doesn't do buildings very well. Sure, we can do buildings in there, but it's not what Plant's designed to do. Plant is designed to get that piping stuff done as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and at fabrication accurately. So Revit can come in and really helpful with the building elements and the overall structures that complement. And so the top image there, of course, is a plant that is inside a shed or a building, is a classic example. It might be a great way to collaborate with the tent rather than trying to revert to some less efficient ways to do that structure. And there are obviously workflows between the two with structures too. Now, concrete design is where Revit is really good. It also has the formwork and the rebar built in, where that gets fully detailed and comes out in drawings and fabrication details. Honestly, I haven't done much with that, and I don't really understand it, but I understand it is really powerful and interesting, and certainly worth keeping an eye on. Sorry, I just thought I saw a question come through. Not just yet, so that's good. I'm just going to delete that one. Leave that one there. And of course, talked about before about cable trays, your HVAC systems and general ducting, which is also a powerhouse of the Revit side. We don't tend to do that too much in Plant 3D, although of course you can. It's just where Revit really comes into its own. And there's also, of course, AutoCAD MEP. Plumbing fixtures and plumbing systems is what you often hear people in the Revit environment. The way I personally think about that is, if it's inside a building, it's part of a building, then that's the kind of thing that you would use Revit for, because it's integrated within that environment. Now, the bottom graphic on the left side is simply showing that there's a bit of a workflow there with the Revit environment, including Plant 3D, coupled with Navisworks and InfraWorks to do visualizations, where the Revit model can be exported to DWGs and brought into the Plant 3D environment. Obviously, it's an AutoCAD DWG. It doesn't have the level of intelligence to it. Similarly, an AutoCAD Plant 3D model can be exported and brought into the Revit environment to have that cross-pollination there. And they can then both be brought in from the Revit model back up into an InfraWorks model to do some wonderful visualizations and really big views of the entire environment in situ within a landscape and all those sort of things. And then, of course, the back end of that is we can also continue to use our tried and tested product Navisworks, which is we can do timeliners in there, so that helps us with scheduling of the project and animations if you want to do that. We can do highly accurate, highly complicated, if you want to go that path, clash detection and a whole bunch of things. But I think I might be getting a bit ahead of myself. So it all does become integrated together. Now, we just thought we'd take a quick pause. There are products that we have that work well with Revit and with Plant 3D, and reality capture is a big part of that, and we tend to see a lot of people starting to embrace this more. The prices in the last 10 years of getting a scan done has come down so far. It's becoming really accessible, almost to the domestic level, and you can do it well. In fact, it is the domestic level, because you can do it with your iPhone these days, or whatever phone you've got, whatever camera, and use the photo to mesh, although that's not going to give you a scale for you. But if you've got a tape measure, you can certainly fix that as well. This is a video. I'm going to see how that plays, and we'll see what happens. So this is just a little video. with the world these days and the scanners, you can get some now that are so cheap that you can, it's so easy to use. They're literally a single push of a button. You can run down to a site and you can grab all this sort of scanning. The huge advantage, of course, is to get this level of detail that you're seeing on the screen would be just weeks and weeks of tape measure and sketching to be able to get that, and you still never get exactly the right measurement. Each one of those dots you're seeing is a laser measurement, which is just indispensable in the design environment once you're used to it. What we're showing is it doesn't matter whether it's plant piping or Revit piping, it could be the same thing, but it gives you the ability to route that piping in with the existing environment in place. And that's looking like a ship, actually. Just look at that side there. So really, really powerful tool. For reverse engineering, for building out your 3D models, getting that accurate measurement exactly where you need it. And I've certainly seen that become highly valuable to a number of our clients. And like I said, with the cost of everything coming down, it becomes one of those things that just becomes day-to-day experiences. How much left is on that? I might pause that there. I'm not seeing any questions on reality capture coming through, so I will keep moving on. So the next thing we want to look at is, so when you're talking about both products and comparing the features as well, both are now also storable on BIM 360 docs, which sort of changes the dynamic a little bit. As you're probably aware, 2018 to 2020, Plant 3D was in the BIM 360 Teams environment, and that was the same as Revit for a period of time, but none of our other products were in there. Now that we're in 2021, if you're using that, you can access the collaboration feature for Plant in the Docs environment, which means that we are now working in the same project or same cloud storage space as our Civil 3D colleagues, our Revit colleagues. We can also share any other DWG up there with specific knowledge on the workflows. And there are also workflows to leverage things like the BIM 360 coordination space to be able to do automated clash detection and issue management. And Docs adds in a whole bunch of advanced features, the absolute least of which is the permissions, allowing you to control whoever has access to what. But we covered a lot of that last month, so I won't go over it too much. Just worth noting here that Revit, when it started doing a collaboration feature or the work sharing feature, did start in the BIM 360 Teams environment, and that is accessible or still currently usable all the way up to Revit 2018.3. At the same time, in 2018.3 for Revit, you can access BIM 360 Team and BIM 360 Docs as separate spaces for projects in the same version. However, as soon as you hit 2019 as a version for Revit, then you are again restricted to only the next-gen BIM 360 Docs solution for your file storage, which aligns with our Plant solutions in 2021. So there's a bit of a version disparity there, but the end result is where you really want to be is have all your work team working in a consolidated environment, which is BIM 360 Docs as we are going forward. And that environment is only going to get better and more comprehensive and more thorough as the years go on and we build it out to service the industry. The big part of that is talking about what I'm ultimately saying there. You can see at the bottom there, talking about is centralizing your data. We talk about it as a common data environment is the right terminology. Of course, it builds on a whole bunch of things there. There's a lot of value that you can derive from that. But the simple thing we're seeing at the moment is some massive value for people in the current global disruption, just taking their projects, being able to put them up in the cloud and work from anywhere in the world relatively seamlessly anyway. I have got a link there in the bottom right-hand side, which will take you to last month's community meetup. And if you download the PDF when it's published in the next 24 hours or so, then you'll be able to access that. And I will show you the page in a bit. The other side of that is to just highlight the point that Revit and Plant 3D are not two separate products that are completely disparate. They do work together, and one of the great examples of that is the P&ID connector for Revit. If you haven't heard about this before, it is basically a P&ID drawn in Plant 3D that is made accessible to the 3D modeling side of Revit MEP. The way that basically works is it's a collaboration project for Plant, and that can be, again, version dependent, whether you're in BIM 360 Teams or BIM 360 Docs. You share that project to the cloud, you detail your P&IDs as you normally would in Plant 3D, and a Revit designer, who is, if you're going to do the piping in Revit, can access that P&ID, and then in very, very simplistic terms, selecting the drawing from the browser. Once that opens, you can select the pipeline and then individually select the pipe or a valve and drop that into your Revit model, taking some of the properties with it. Now, there is a bit of a caveat there that for that to all function, there is a mapping, similar to why we map P&IDs into the 3D environment, but it's obviously less intuitive because it's a completely different product. So there's a bunch of mapping that needs to happen to get that to function. But it certainly does work, and I would certainly recommend it for some of the more simple projects or Revit favoured projects, because Revit doesn't do P&IDs quite as well as Plant. As I said, each have their strength. So just touching on the points there is a cloud-based collaboration, supports between them both, support for Plant 3D users to share the designs as well, and Plant 3D users can share their P&IDs with Revit users, enabling Revit users to complete their work with the Plant design in there as well. So that brings us to what tool is it that you want to use? What tool is the best in what circumstance? So let's just take a beat from something we were discussing last year internally, and now I've had permission to share this slide from some internal teams. What we're looking at here is the types of projects that are used across the industries, typically serviced by Revit MEP. So that's the ducting, the piping side of it, mechanical tools, and in the top right-hand corner you're seeing the Plant 3D industry. Now, looking at those, it might be a bit hard to read on your screen, but the bottom right-hand corner are the colors of the dots we're showing. So the dots are project types, and the colors indicate what kind of piping systems they're talking about. So let's start at the bottom left corner. We're looking at educational institutions, hospitals, commercial buildings, industrial facilities that are non-process type things, civil infrastructure there in the middle. And as you go across into the Plant 3D side, you can see there's deliberately an overlap in the middle. And what we're looking at is these medium pressure processes, the green ones being low pressure and the red being typically high pressure, as a generalization. So the blue ones, as we go through, so the medium pressure, we're again looking at wastewater systems, water and wastewater systems, potentially semiconductors, food and beverage facilities, industrial facilities again, but looking at the process side of that, marine, so talking about shipbuilding and ship design, moving further across pharmaceuticals and biotech, mining and minerals processing, and pulp and paper, all in that sort of medium pressure sort of space, because they're not dealing with that really high, really hazardous materials. If you go right to the red side, probably red's appropriate because they tend to be more hazardous, sort of my backyard and my experience. We've got the petrochemical installations, oil and gas refining, oil and gas production as a separate thing, and of course power generation as well. Talking about highly complicated, needing high accuracy installations. Across the graph at the top on the left side, we've spaced those out in complexity. So that's complexity of design, complexity of the requirements, and you see obviously in the high pressure systems we're nearly always talking about some really high standards that need to be adhered to, really, really high controls and Q&A, all that sort of stuff. And Across the bottom, talking about the pipe fabrication, really this is where the delineation comes in for me, and is great to talk about, is whether the fabrication gets done on-site or you're doing it off-site. So when we talk about on-site, what we're talking about is, in my world, we used to call that field fit, and it is typically you might order 1 kilometre of 6 metre lengths of 6-inch pipe, and 1,000 elbows and 100 T's and a bunch of valves, and it all turns up on site, and the guys on site all build that into the project, whether that's a building or a hospital or whatever it is. One of the most common things people see visibly is your civil infrastructure ones, your big concrete pipes, people putting in drains or things like that. As we move to the the off-site fabrication, we're talking about we need to then take these piping, they need to be fabricated inside a manufacturing facility. So that is where we start talking about needing construction isometrics to be able to generate those weld maps, all that sort of really high detail stuff that is needed, so that we can control that output. And they are typically fabricated in spools inside a fabrication shop, trucked to site for field assembly. So the delineation there for me is typically on-site field fit, off-site fabrication, and field assembly. Now I just want to pause there and see if there's any questions on that. This often generates some conversation, and I'd love to hear anybody's feedback or thoughts. It's great to see a few extra people coming in. Hope you didn't miss too much. I just unmute everybody and see. Sorry, I thought every now and again the system mutes people on me, and I'm just gonna just unmuted everybody to make sure anybody can talk. All right, I'm not seeing any chats, any unmutes, or any raised hands, or any questions. So I will move on. So just keep in mind. So the line through the middle for me is the field fit or not field fit stuff, but don't take this as a rule. It is just something we're looking at as an organization to try and look at where we're developing and where their products are the development of things might go in the future. No promises, I'm not suggesting it's definitely going away. It's just how we're bucketing things for the time being. Subject to change as always. So, pros and cons of each, why they add value. So for us, when we're talking about this, if you come to me and you say, I want to know whether I should be using Revit or Plant, I want to talk to you about which one's going to give you the best value. All right, they're both Autodesk products. For me, it's about what's going to help you succeed in your business, in your project, and which one is going to do that the best way. So let's look at the Plant side of things. Again, I know you're very much involved in these already, and you don't need to labour the point. So we're going to put a couple of things in here just to offset the Revit side for those who are a little bit less familiar. This is where Plant's really going to add value. Obviously, there's all sorts of things in here that we haven't mentioned. There's dozens and dozens of features and functionality, but at a very top level, the first thing that comes to mind for us when we're talking about it is spec-driven design. Revit's not doing spec-driven. It's very, very simple. We've also got the P&IDs in there as a tool. Both can do them, but again, that spec-driven and the validation and the intelligence that comes into that P&ID and the general spec-driven design is where you see huge value coming out of the Plant 3D environment. I've also called it quick, intelligent P&ID drafting. Now, we say that simply because it is generally very quick. It's using those smarts in there, the intelligent design tools to make everything just that little bit more efficient. Industry standard symbol libraries that come with it, and of course you can build out your own. And it is the fastest one I've seen to ever create custom symbols. P&ID validation tools adding on top of that to make sure things are correct. And that's simple things like the shaders, the painters rather is the right word for it. And P&IDs can be used to support Revit pipe modeling. So it's not just a stand only, it's adding value to the project. I have added a link there on the right-hand side. It's getting a little bit long in the tooth now, but it's still perfectly valid. And I've recently done an analysis on a project I was working on, and I got the same numbers. Comparing an AutoCAD 2D drafting P&ID project that didn't use Plant 3D or intelligent P&IDs, comparing that to one that does use intelligent P&IDs. That particular study done by Kobayashi showed a 42% productivity gain using intelligent P&IDs. Really interesting study, certainly worth a look if you haven't seen it before. Link there in the PDF when you want it. But yeah, as you can probably just Google that Kobayashi study, Plant P&ID, and you'll probably find it anyway. Yeah, definitely worth dropping into that. Rapid and intuitive 3D modeling is also a big part of it. You can do modeling in both products, but in Plant 3D, we have access to parametric equipment models with templates. Of course, we can also import the ADS files from Inventor if you've got those. You can use structural modeling inside Plant using industry standard sections that come with the product, or you can download the additional ones. And there's also a connection path between Plant 3D and Advanced Steel, and those two work, probably one of the better products that work together in our suite at the moment. Of course, that can also have a workflow into Revit structure as well, so that's an option there. Automation of production isometrics or piping isometrics, construction isometrics. Ideally, in a perfect world, we can click a button and get a set of construction isometrics out of Plant 3D models without any touch-up required, and that is the gold standard. If we can get to that point, it'd be perfect. But for now, if you need to do any work, it's still a big improvement over having to draw them manually, and it adds in that validation because you're getting it from the model, and ensuring everything is correct. It reduces human error as much as possible. And of course, where the Kobayashi study shows a lot of the value, a significant amount, is coming out of that reporting side. If you're not leveraging reporting in Plant 3D, you're missing out on some huge value. So they're easy to do, easy to set up, really quick to report. They're just about a push button if you need it. And if you actually are just after a report, just launching the report section is easy. No, sorry, I'm just seeing a question come through. You're just launching the report creator, doesn't consume a license. Yes, P&ID connector is in Revit. Let me come back to that because I think we're going to touch on it in a minute. Okay, so looking at Revit, why it adds value. Integrated parametric BIM solution. So it is considered an integrated parametric BIM solution with computational and generative design tools. There's a mouthful. It is a very wordy slide. We can use Dynamo Player, so that's our tool for scripting using a window or a block-based programmatic tool. And that is now being able to leverage that coupled with Revit and Dynamo to do generative design in the latest version. So that allows them to iterate, test out multiple versions, and see which ones meet the requirements best, or with a generative design function. And it's minimizing the time-consuming tasks during design detailing analysis. There's some really interesting features we'll touch on the analysis side. Analysis features for suitable design codes for MEP and structure, which are including parametric code of architecture and structural MEP and customizable embedded macros. We will come back to the analysis thing in a couple of slides. I do want to focus on that because a lot of people don't know about it. And the BIM 360 platform interoperability. If you're using BIM 360 design with Revit, there is a whole back end to the BIM 360 design feature or module, is the word I'm looking for, that Revit leverages or is built out for Revit with regards to publishing and sharing of the files at various stages into the BIM 360 project. If you're interested in that, please reach out to us. There is a whole suite of tools and accelerators things we can talk about there to share with you. Certainly, it's a comprehensive and complicated module to meet the needs of a very large industry. And of course, we can do realistic native rendering capabilities within the Revit environment and level of detail monitoring as well. That can also leverage cloud services, and there's a bunch of things we can do there within the Revit side. A lot going on there. We threw this slide together. It could use a bit of polish, I think, but the whole intention is we're just looking at in the middle there, we're seeing Navisworks, BIM 360 Max, 3ds Max, and InfraWorks, which are modeling tools into the InfraWorks does some modeling, but realistically their real power is in the visualization of designs and the manipulation of that visualization. In the next arc out, we start adding on things like piping design in the Plant 3D, the conceptual P&IDs, Revit structure. It's just sort of a layout. All those products can work together in various workflows to build out a comprehensive project. Just because you've got guys that are working in Plant 3D doesn't mean you shouldn't have structural guys working in Advanced Steel or Revit. There are workflows to manage that. And on the outside, we can see there BIM 360 coordination, which is about working with the designs in a homogenistic space, to be able to do clash detection, issue management, and be able to visualize your entire project in one view. BIM design, which is we talked about already, and BIM docs is the foundation that underpins all our BIM 360 common data environment solution, where everything is physically stored. So the logical next step, of course, is just having a look at. So we've talked about two products independently working on projects. I've referred to it numerous times. They are not necessarily independent and they can work together. So we just did a quick brainstorm and had a look at, if you were doing a fully comprehensive project, what might you tools you use for various parts of the project. Really straightforward. In some ways, because of the simplicity of it, you might just do a conceptual design layout in Revit, and then you can export that out to so the buildings or the structures. You might even import a Plant 3D bit of piping if you just want to do it really quickly, and you can export that or import that into InfraWorks for a visualization to give you your tender or your early stage designs some real meat, some real visualization capability. Of course, in a plant design, the next step is the P&IDs. Obviously, in the ideal environment, they would be finished before the piping starts, but that's never the practical reality. So we talk about that has to be in Plant 3D, in my mind at least, and you can do them in Revit, but for value, you want to use Plant 3D. Equipment detailing, tanks and pumps, while we can put them in Plant 3D, and I would encourage you to use those as placeholders. There's certainly, if you're going to do details of those, you actually want fabrication drawings for a pump or a tank. Then Inventor's the tool for that, and Inventor and Fusion 360 to some degree to do all your equipment modeling. That can then export an ADSK file, which can then be re-imported into Plant 3D with all the intelligence and connecting the two workflows. In the same way, you can do structural in Plant 3D, and it's often a great way to start it. Just lay out some pipes and sections so that you can do your piping in context. But then when your structural person comes on, you can export those structural drawings, or actually open them in Advanced Steel, and start working on them and converting them to proper detailed structural drawings, and which will ultimately end up in actual fabrication drawings. Advanced Steel will export fabrication drawings for their structural members, much the same way Plant 3D does the construction isometrics. Alternatively, you can do the same thing in Revit, where you detail the structure out in Revit and just using same concept, different platform. General arrangements and orthographics, of course, Plant 3D can do those, and so can Revit. Again, the discussion there is whether you want the Revit model in your Plant 3D orthographics, or you want your Plant 3D in your orthographic views in Revit, and which way you go there. Certainly there's pros and cons to that in their own way, and there's a workflow between those. Concrete structures and slabs, realistically, the best value there is in Revit. It'll do the reinforcement for you, does the details of that. Let's just leave that there. That's really easy. Analysis has to be, you can do your initial analysis in Revit, which we'll touch the next couple of slides. But if you want to do some proper structure and concrete analysis, robot structural analysis is your tool for that. And we've already talked about coordination modeling in BIM 360 as an example, or clash detection using Navisworks or BIM 360 coordination. Visualization animation, again, you can do some of that with Navisworks using Timeliner to create animations. 3ds Max and InfraWorks can also flesh that out to be much more elaborate if you wanted to. Just looking at piping services, plumbing and pipes and fixtures, ducts, HVAC, etc., we would certainly look at Revit as being the best for that. Again, it's talking about that field fit or fabrication, shop fab type work, and electrical equipment, control panels, and schematics. Revit would be good for that, and or AutoCAD Electrical is another alternative for the schematics as well. And if you're doing the boxes and all those sort of things, certainly Inventor might be an option as well. Again, bunch of links there if you're interested. Revit MEP, I just wanted to show you this. There's some interesting features in there around the analytics side. The MEP fabrication extension integration, that's a lot of words, allows you to do a bunch of bits and pieces with Revit on the ducting side and do all that MEP bits and pieces. The one that interests me quite personally is the pipe flow units. So you can see there on the right-hand side, there's some basic plumbing there done by in the Revit model, and with some relatively basic inputs, the software can run some analytics, giving you some pressures and some flows and some basic data on that piping, which is quite interesting. Something I think would be awesome to have in Plant 3D, but not there today. So that's where it comes into its own. We talked before about systems analysis or the generative design side. This was sort of the start to that, is looking at the MEP systems analysis. You can do a whole bunch of work here, creating analytical geometry from the models, validate your models, and then review the analysis of the flows and the ducts and make sure everything works. Looking at your energy consumption, you can do solar analysis. There's a lot you can do here, depending how far you want to push it. And extend that into the equipment zone and plant loop types as well. So there's quite a lot of detail there. A big link across the bottom if you're after that. Click to go to next. And so there was a question in the Q&A panel. It is P&ID connector in Revit. So this is the slide I was waiting for to answer that. Yes, it absolutely is. It is in Revit. I couldn't tell you exactly which versions it came and left from. It has changed. I think it's 2016 to 2018.3 is the Teams ones. I think it works for. Certainly it is in Revit 2021, and that connects to your Plant 3D 2021 projects in BIM 360 docs. So just reading that slide actually out loud, it tells me that the P&ID modeler is now available in BIM 360 docs, and I would suggest that is with 2021 because the plant projects are now there, and it replaces the functionality we have with Teams. So there is that dual connection, and it is dependent on where your plant project is shared, and you need to make sure the right version of Revit is being used. The way it works is very simple. When you're in Revit, there is a tool in the ribbon somewhere. I thought you would have highlighted that you can click on it, and then you get this open dialog here at the top, where you pick the project, the plant project you want to connect to, and then you select from the new panel that opens up, and you can see that on the right side of the window, the line and the P&ID and the line that you're interested in. Clicking on that opens, you can see it, so you got P1005 there. When you click on that, it expands all these. To draw the valves, you would just simply left click on the valve and place it into the piping in the Revit model. And similarly, you can run the piping the same way. You click on the piping, select the connection on the pump, and run that to the equipment. There is a little bit of validation going on there. It's all about bringing the materials over, and there is a lot of mapping that needs to happen to make it work well, but it is a good little feature. Certainly, if you're doing things that are more Revit-centric, but you want schematics as well, it can certainly be some time saving. Does Plant 3D 2021 pull out IFC? That's actually a really good question. I don't remember whether it does. I think it doesn't, is my recollection. Maybe Vinod, you can have a think about that. I'm going to say it doesn't, and if I'm wrong, I will certainly get back and correct that after this is at the end of this meeting, and maybe Vinod might be able to correct me as we're going through. All right. Yep, so, okay, Navisworks adds value as well. So don't forget, we've got all these tools that are trying to build out a holistic project for you, and Navisworks is one of those. Going into Navisworks still has advantages over BIM360 coordination. While the coordination is a great space, really, really powerful, it still doesn't do certain things. You still can't do a quantity takeoff in BIM360 coordination. While you can do clash detection, it's all automated, so there's limited functionality. If you can't manipulate it. If you want to manipulate it to change the accuracy or do some roughing clashes, then you can do them much more easily in Navisworks. You can implement 5D visualization, which is a scheduling of construction using timeliner. So that you get your construction schedule and bring that in from an Excel or whatever format that's coming from, or project management, and schedule the construction. And then you can run that as a visualization to see how things are going. Make sure you've got no clashes or through across time is the point there. And you could, he's also got a note there saying, don't forget, you can also import project management databases from MS Project or Primavera. So you're not having to build it out from scratch. All that timeline stuff can be connected. And you just need to bring it back in and it should just update. So some really powerful functions there. Don't overlook Navisworks. It's a really good tool, even though it has been around for quite a while. That just means it's mature and well developed. Best practice at the bottom there, always make sure to identify common reference points at an early stage to ease placement. For example, shared coordinates and scale management. This is really important that when you're working across products that you define things like a project datum or shared coordinates, as they're called in Revit, to make sure that everybody's working at the same coordinate system and you can bring everything together. They all sit in the right place and you haven't got to do as many moves or transforms, which then build in error. So if you can get that all laid out right at the start, then there's little confusion. It's best to have a project coordinate system that is close to the project so that your plant design is within 1.5 kilometers or whatever, 1 mile from the datum, and that datum is referenced or is acknowledged in the documentation to be a real world coordinate that can go out to the civil environment and the InfraWorks environment, and Revit can then also use that as a shared coordinate location for the project too. All right, so you're ready. We've been through a lot of data there. I think I answered all the questions. I touched on the IFC one. And Vinod, good man. Modeler was available from 2018, but not a lot of change. Yes, okay, so there's a comment in there about the modeler. Mate, if you could find something about the IFC, that would be great. So what's next? Let's just take a pause and check for any questions as we're going. I will just make sure everybody is unmuted. If you couldn't before, you should be able to unmute yourself. So while people are thinking, feel free to butt in at any stage. The next step in my mind is always upskill your team. There is no substitute for quality training. And these days, life is constantly learning. We're never going to have to stop learning. We need to do it continually. So we've got a couple of slides here with hyperlinks. If you haven't seen them before, absolutely check them out. There's some really, really good content. And if you have seen them before, some of them you need to keep up to date with. The Plant 3D with the Experts video blog is something we're updating on a regular basis, and it changes all the time, and a lot of views there, which is great. We've added some Revit tutorials here specifically, some classes, AU classes, just as reference. So you don't feel you need to do them, but they're certainly there if you're interested in the more Revit side of things, how things work together. So I see a question. Is there any chance to add piping specs and catalogs for piping module modeling like Plan 3? I'm assuming you mean in Revit. That would be, for me, I don't know, honestly. I do not know whether they're going to be adding spec-driven workflows into Revit in the future. It would be honestly be 100% speculation. No worries, I'm glad that helped. Look, keep an eye on it because we're doing a lot of development of these things every year. Every day there's things being changed and improved. And the Revit guys they do meetups like we're doing today. So that might be something you could ask in those and see if you can get an answer from them, because that's not really my area, but a good question nonetheless. Learn BIM 360. So if you're interested in the BIM 360 side, if you haven't seen it before, we have these Learn BIM 360 page, link there at the top so you can look at it as soon as you want. They're guided learning paths, we call them. You sign in and it will track your learning for you, so you can do them in 1 and 2 minutes or 5 minute little spurts when you've got to just need to get your brain away from the project for 5 minutes. You can just jump in there, you can have a look. They're great for coming back to for reference and to remind you, what's required, kind of like a reference book. They're all broken down into different areas. We've got the coordination space there on the top right-hand side, which is looking at all the models in one place and some issue management and clash detection. That's really cool to have a look at. And if you want to talk about workflows to get into there from Plant, I've got a nice little trick which makes things fairly easy. And document management on the far left, which is the one that's really needed for collaboration, of course. We build out a lot of content on our Customer Success Learning Hub, and if you haven't been there recently, we've just in the last week revamped it, so it all looks different. It should be easier to find things. If you haven't been there in a while, jump in and have a look and see what's available now. And it's really easy to find all the meetups in there, so that you can see the Revit one and you can see the Plant ones as well really easily. So if you're not, just confirm for us. Thank you very much, mate. Plant does not have IFC support. Sorry, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so Plant does not have IFC support, but if you have AutoCAD tool sets, then you have the option of using AutoCAD architecture, which kind of supports IFC 2.3 and 4 is the recent version of IFC. So you should be able to do a data transfer through architecture. That's kind of a workaround at the moment, David.
Clever idea. Excellent. Thank you. Touched on the virtual meetups and the health dashboard. So the health dashboard, if you haven't seen that before, have a look at that and it'll let you know when things are not quite working on cloud services. There is, and I'm just going to drop out to my browser for a second, see if I can see it. I think it's that one. If you're using the new 2021 Plant collaboration services, that's using Plant shared projects in BIM 360 docs, what you need to look for is these two services here. You notice there's a Europe after the second one. That is telling you that is the European server-based service. If you're using those, they're two services, as well as the docs one that you want to monitor to see if they're having any issues, and you'll also be notified of any maintenance that's going to happen. I need to update this slide. I haven't got around to it yet, so I'm cheating a little bit, and that's there if you need to look at it. That brings me to the end of my content. I was just going to, so I'm still waiting for any more questions, and thank you for confirming, everybody. It's great to see you're getting what you need. We're sort of shaking things up a little bit the last couple of months. This topic was last month's because we wanted to do the Plant collaboration stuff first. We are covering, now I'm just looking at our community meetup resource store, so there's a link there. And you should, if you haven't seen this before, Google that, it should come up. What I'm going to draw your attention to, if you want to know more about the workflows, we are planning to cover that again in, I think it is July. So in 2 months, we're hoping to take a bit more of a detailed look at the interoperability of using Plant 3D and Revit in the same workspace, which is following on from this particular month's topic. Okay, if you haven't seen this before, it's really recommend having a look at it. We do have all the recordings available as hyperlinks and the presentations for previous months. And as you'll see there, last month we had some, so back in April, we had some, back in April. That's right, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. We had some Q&A that didn't get answered during this session, so we started adding these little PDFs which you can access and see the questions to the answers that you were looking for during the meetup, which is just a nice little feature. And I was going to suggest if I just take that back to the home page, I will show you the new format. So that's the new format there. If you are looking for the plant meetups, you need to go to meetups, and then you'll see the architecture one, which is where you might be looking at the Revit stuff, BIM, building engineering, civil engineering, electrical, mechanical, and down the bottom our plant meetups, where you can also get the previous, so register for the next sessions, and in the recordings you'll see the previous ones. I lost my presentation. There we go. So look, thank you very much. I'll just give it a beat there to see if there's any other questions. Vinod has put some hyperlinks into and some information into the chat. Thank you for that. Other than that, thank you very much for staying with us. It's been great to see a number of people in here, and there's some very familiar names, which is great to see always. Again, the only other thing is we have a fixed forum post in the Plant 3D forums, which I won't go to right now because I need to finish the session out. We're over time already. If you've got questions or anything else in addition around these topics, specifically with the forum, with this community meetup or the vlog, please put your comment. Please feel free to chat with us or connect with us in those forum posts that are pinned to the tops. They should be really easy to see, and you should see my icon as well. So feel free to comment there and engage with us. Apart from that, thank you very much for coming, everybody, and I really love to see the questions. It's really good to get some feedback. And I will hope to see you all next month. Thank you very much. Thanks, Vinod. Appreciate your attendance, mate.
Thank you, David. Thanks, everyone.